Thank you so much for joining us today. Dear friends, Teire versammelte Freund, in this wonderful weather, you had the strength and inspiration to come and join us. We really appreciate it. A hartelijken Dank voor zijn met ons heint. I am honored to welcome you to our annual memorial gathering here in Riverside Park, this year marking the 83rd anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. We come together at a time when our gathering takes on greater significance with every passing year, as hatred and anti-Semitism increasingly poison the events of our everyday lives. More than ever, the uprising signifies the importance of our resistance to tyranny and continues to inspire our fight for social justice and a bessere und schönere Welt. We come together at this simple, unpretentious stone, der Stein, as we call it in Yiddish, to honor the extraordinary heroism of the fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. Der Stein does not derive its poignancy from its grandeur, nor from the fact that it was embedded here in 1947 as a promise that a permanent tribute to the Warsaw Ghetto uprising would later be built. Der Stein derives its meaning from us, because it represents unspeakable horror and magnificent heroism, because it possesses the silent scream of death and the determination to fight against all odds, so that the ghetto fighters could say, "We will choose the moment of our death, not the Nazis." I'd like to take a moment to thank the Parks Department staff, our own David Goldstick and the Riverside Conservancy for taking such good care of our gathering place. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Josh Binderman, who is Mayor Mamdani's Jewish Affairs Advisor, and Felisa Wisdom, Executive Director of the Mayor's Office to Combat Anti-Semitism. Also, our heartfelt thanks to Shane Baker for his tireless efforts in spearheading today's event, and to Fagela Jacobs, Rita Mead, and Moish Rosenfeld for helping to coordinate our annual commemoration. We're also very grateful to have Zisel Slepovich here to accompany our singers and lead us in song. As in past decades, we come together to pay tribute to the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, and while we know this event is taking place against the backdrop of horrific events in the Middle East and at home, we are designating this time to unite, to remember the Churban and focus our love, respect, and derech eretz on all who resisted, who fought, who lived, and who died. Also, as a reminder, we ask that there be no applause during our program, as this gathering is a memorial. 83 years ago, on the first night of Passover, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising began. April 19th marked the beginning of an epic battle, not for victory, as the resistance fighters knew from the outset, but for the honor of our people. At 2 a.m., lookouts spotted the German artillery approaching the ghetto, and they entered 2 hours later. By 7 in the morning, their battalions were in position inside and outside the walls of the ghetto. The Nazis used the intersection at Mila and Zamenhof streets to stage their assault, intentionally while everyone slept, or so they thought. But the band of resistance fighters was waiting for them, hidden behind barricades at the four corners of the intersection. They suddenly opened fire with handmade Molotov cocktails and shots from their lone machine gun. Soon, the street was littered with the bodies of Nazis. This is how it began. And when the battle ended, Marek Edelman, one of the leaders of the Jewish Fighting Organization, wrote, On May 10, 1943, this period of our bloody history, the history of the Warsaw Jews, came to an end. The site where the buildings of the ghetto once stood became a ragged heap of rubble, reaching 3 stories high. Those who were killed in action had done their duty to the end, to the last drop of blood that soaked into the pavement of the Warsaw Ghetto. We who did not perish, leave it to you to keep their memory alive forever. Time and again, history's darkest moments give us opportunities for greatness. During these challenging times, all of us must commit to the hard work of protecting democracy, liberty, and freedom. The work is not easy, and there is always a price to pay. But it's a price we have to pay, because the evil that drives fascism and autocracy is ultimately no match for the promise of liberty that illuminates the lives of free people everywhere. Our parents and grandparents sang Zognet Kemol as du gehst dem letzten Weg as they faced certain death. Never say this is the end of the road. And indeed, we are here because our work has not ended. We resist in every way we can. We resist because we cannot give in to tyranny. Our struggle does not end until every person knows the story and the lessons of the Holocaust. Our struggle does not end because their fight is our fight. Our struggle does not end because the hatred that sparked the Holocaust continues today. Our struggle does not end until every life flourishes in freedom. Wir seinen da, noch einmal und take noch einmal, again and again, dor v'dor, generation to generation. That is our legacy. May the invincible soul of those who fought, perished, and survived inspire us to be compassionate and to have the wisdom to find peace within and build peace between nations. The price of freedom is far less dear than the price of forsaking it. Long live their blessed memories. Kavod sei Rondenk. I'd like to ask Shane Baker to please come up.
Those of us who attend Yiddish third Seyders every Passover know well Binyamin Heller's poem In Warsaw Ghetto is Chodesh Nisan, which describes the outbreak of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising on the first Seder night of 1943. But in Bundest Dritte Sedorim in Melbourne, Australia, the poem holding that place in their Haggadah is this piece by Majus Olitzky, who, like Binyamin Heller, survived the war on the Soviet side. Olitzky's poem, A Seder in Geto, is not about armed resistance, but spiritual and cultural resistance. It describes the remnants of a family surviving the German occupation in a ghetto. Despite the jackboots marching outside their window, they dream of Elianovi's arrival and better times as they muster meager resources to celebrate their holiday, Jewish heritage, and tradition. A Seder in Geto von Majus Olitzky. Von alle in Keller es seien geblieben nur 3. A Tate, a Mame, ein Jüngel von 7, zu praven dem Seder aufs Nei. Auf keutigen Tischtag 3 ledige Teller, a finstere Matze in mit. Und draußen von Blechen der schwockenem Keller der Teut spannt mit nazischer Tritt. No sei, mit die alte Gottes in Hand, was weißen von Schreck jetzt die 3. Sie seien a Reusschein von bitteren Land, wie Prinzen der Freite und frei. Bald wird der Vater noch kommen in Rei, oder der, was verfällt nicht zu kommen. Mit lichtigen Augen wird über sie erbrochen lichtige Blumen. Wir sehen sie alle mit Augen vermacht. Wir sehen dort Getelje der Liebe. Arum ist a Stille mit Jontef der Nacht. Und Licht ist in jüdische Stäber. Nun soll sein Licht in jüdische Stäber, in Stäber von den Untergedrückten und in die Stäber von allen Menschen und Völkern, die kommen mit guter Kavone.
I'm honored to introduce our keynote speaker today, Dr. Barbara Kirshenblatt-Gimblett, Professor Emerita of Performance Studies at New York University and currently Chief Curator of the core exhibition at Poland Museum of the History of Polish Jews.
Each day on my way to Poland Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw, I would pass by the monument to the ghetto heroes. On one side, the last march, representing the deportation of 300,000 Jews from the ghetto to Treblinka in the summer of 1942. On the other side, the armed revolt a year later. Shown in high relief, Mordechai Anielewicz, a leader of the uprising, is surrounded by 3 young fighters who bear arms. At his feet, a fallen fighter. Behind him, a despairing mother and child surrounded by the flames of the burning ghetto. Each year, there are commemorations of the uprising at the monument, which is located at the very spot where the uprising broke out. Each year, an anonymous person would send a bouquet of yellow daffodils to Marek Edelman, a leader of the uprising who had remained in Poland after the war. He would leave them at the monument in memory of those who had perished during the insurrection. Since then, Poland Museum of the History of Polish Jews has been distributing paper daffodils to raise awareness of the uprising and its significance. The monument was unveiled on the rubble of the ghetto in 1948 on the 5th anniversary of the uprising. After suppressing the insurrection, the Germans razed the ghetto, which had been the pre-war Jewish neighborhood and home to the largest Jewish community in Europe. James Young has written eloquently about the creation of this monument. But what impressed me most as I read his account was the response of the artist Natan Rappaport, then in Siberia, when news of the uprising reached him in late spring 1943. Rappaport became obsessed with creating a monument to commemorate the uprising. He was experiencing the present as already historical and started planning how to commemorate an event that was barely over. The monument to the ghetto heroes that he created stands at the spot where the uprising broke out, near the pre-war intersection of Gensha and Zamenhof streets. And that is where Poland Museum of the History of Polish Jews stands today. For 65 years, this monument, set in a residential neighborhood and surrounded by communist-era apartment buildings, has been the focal point of Holocaust commemoration in Warsaw. Poland, home to the largest Jewish community in Europe, more than 3,300,000 Jews, was the epicenter of the genocide. More than 90% of Jews in Poland perished. Understandably, their lives have been overshadowed by the tragedy of their deaths. In 1993, the opening of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum prompted the Association of the Jewish Historical Institute of Poland, a Jewish NGO established in Poland in 1951, to envision a museum in Warsaw that would honor those who died by remembering how they lived. If there was a Holocaust museum in Washington, they argued there should be a museum of the history of Polish Jews in Warsaw. Such a museum would complete the memorial complex. It would recall the world that Polish Jews created and that was lost with them. It would recover a 1,000-year history that had been eclipsed by the cataclysm, by the Churban. But how to tell a story that begins in the 10th century and comes forward to the present? The Holocaust, one of 8 historical galleries and the largest, is set within the borders of occupied Poland. And it is when we come to the part about the Warsaw Ghetto, which was also the largest ghetto, that we feel where we are, not only in an exhibition, but also in the very place where the story took place. Those who were there, who recorded their experiences in their diaries, their letters, their reports, those who wrote in real time, on the spot, without knowing what was to come, they speak to us directly. It is thanks to Oynik Shabbos that we have these eyewitness testimonies. This term, Oynik Shabbos, refers to a team of about 60 volunteers led by Emanuel Ringelblum, who secretly collected every shred of evidence about the life and death in the Warsaw Ghetto and beyond. They chose the term Oynik Shabbos, Joy of Sabbath, as their code name because they would meet in secret on Saturday afternoons. At first, they thought that they would use the archive after the war to write a history of the Warsaw Ghetto. But when they realized that they would not survive, they were determined that the archive would survive and cry out to the world. During the Great Deportation in August 1942, Gela Sechstein, an artist, wrote in her last will and testament, quote, "I donate my work to the Jewish Museum to be founded in the future to restore pre-war Jewish cultural life and to study the terrible tragedy of the Jewish community in Poland during the war." Her drawings and last will of testament were preserved in the archive, which was packed in tin boxes and milk cans. The first part of the archive was buried during the Great Deportation, and the second part shortly before the uprising. They were recovered from the rubble of the ghetto after the war. Thanks to that archive, those trapped in the Warsaw Ghetto can speak in their own words directly to the visitor. Listen to how Emanuel Ringelblum and Adam Chernyakov responded to starvation in the ghetto. Chernyakov was the head of the Judenrat, the Jewish council created by the Germans to run the ghetto. Here is Chernyakov writing in his diary in Polish in May 1941. "In our workshops, the workers are fainting from hunger. I'm asking the authorities for permission to buy food in the free market." Here is Ringelblum writing in his diary in Yiddish in May 1942. "One is left with a tragic dilemma. Are we to dole out spoonfuls to everyone with the result that no one will survive? Or are we to give full measure to a few with only a handful having enough to survive?" Chernyakov, as head of the Judenrat, took a practical approach, appealing to German self-interest, while Ringelblum, drawing on the Talmud, wrestled with the moral dilemma. In 2023, to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, Polyne Museum opened a special exhibition, Around Us, a Sea of Fire, the experience of civilians in the Warsaw Ghetto during the uprising. As we remember those who rose up with arms to resist the Germans, let us not forget all those who supported them, body and soul, and who perished in the flames of the burning ghetto.
I'd like to ask Shifee Losacco to come up, please. Sorry, Shifee.
Nu kaufsche Papyrossen, nu kaufsche Sacharin, geworden ist ein Scheure billig wird. A Leben für a Groschen, a Brute Verdienst. Von a Ghetto-Händler hat ihr doch Geld. Kh'heys Yisrolik, ich bin das Kind von a Ghetto. Kh'heys Yisrolik, a heftiger Jung, hat verblieben, Netto, der lang ich als noch, als Zwischchen und a Sohn. A Mantel und a Kragen, Tachtoinem von a Sack, Kaloschen hab ich, zwell noch die Schicht. Und wer es wird nur wagen, zu lachen neuer Sach, dem will ich noch weisen, wer bin ich. Kh'heys Yisrolik, ich bin das Kind von Geto. Kh'heys Yisrolik, a heftiger Jung, hat verblieben, Netto, der lang ich als noch, als Zwischchen und a Sohn. Nicht meint mich hat geboren, die heftiger Gas. Ein Tate Mama, euch gewinn a Kind. Ich bin ungeboren, nicht meint es ist a Spaß. Ich bin geblieben wie im Feld der Wind. Kh'heys Yisrolik, nur wenn keiner settet, wie ich still sich von euch, aber Träer, nur von mein Treue, besser als man rettet, zu was der Mannen und machen's Herz sich schwer. Nur von mein Treue, besser als man rettet, zu was der Mannen und machen's Herz sich schwer.
Now I'd like to ask Susan Nowogrodzki to please come up.
My father, Majus Nowogrodzki, was a good friend of Marek Edelman. In April 2009, when my father was 88 years old and Marek was 90, my father traveled to Warsaw to see his old friend. While we were there, we attended the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising Memorial Gathering on April 19th and walked, with Marek being pushed in a wheelchair, to his stations of pain: the Ghetto Memorial, the Ziegelboim Wall, Micha Street Headquarters, the Umschlagplatz. Marek, a cardiologist, told my father, "In the past, when my patients complained that they had difficulty walking, I thought that when I prescribed a pill, they would be okay. Now I know there is no pill for old age." Marek died in 2009, and my father wrote about his friend many times since then. I'll now read one of my father's essays about Marek. The Manner of Dying. In the Bund archives at the Evo, I came across a remarkable letter addressed to Elena Margolis Edelman in Paris by someone who signed himself as Olitzky. It was dated September 16, 1975, 32 years after the Ghetto Uprising. In the letter, Olitzky relates that he had visited Marek Edelman in Lodz and they had a long chat about the ghetto fighters' sentiments and attitudes that led to the uprising. Who was Volinsky? From remarks in the letter referring to Race Street, perhaps he was one of the Jewish ghetto fighters who was in the group hiding out on Race Street in the northern Warsaw suburb of Zoliborz. This group was rescued and brought to a Polish Red Cross hospital outside Warsaw by Irena Margolis, then a nurse at the hospital. She described this incident in her wonderful book, The Warsaw Ghetto's Little Nurse, The Memoirs of Irena Margolis Edelman, in the chapter called Race Street. The conversation between Marek Edelman and Volinsky occurred shortly after an interview Edelman gave to the Polish newspaperwoman Helena Kral. This interview was published in the Polish literary magazine Odra under the title, A Manner of Dying. In his words, Marek Edelman expressed what motivated the ghetto fighters to organize the uprising. Can one call it an uprising? Asked Marek. In an uprising, the people who take up the fight harbor a glimmer of hope that even if they did not survive, their act would have some effect on future events. This was not so in the case of the ghetto fighters. In a meeting of the so-called central staff, nobody wanted to take over the command except Mordechai Anilevich. He wanted it so much that we elected him, relates Marek. Nobody expected to survive. Death was a certainty. Some simply accepted it. Others overcame their fear of it. And even though society held that dying with their guns in their hands was somehow more heroic or dignified than silently going to the trains to Treblinka, the ghetto fighters did not share this view. Chernikov's suicide was a private act. His activities as president of the Judenrat, doing the Germans' bidding in the hope of saving some Jews, could not elevate his act to have any symbolic meaning. Not so Arthur Ziegelbaum's suicide in London, which did shake the conscience of the Western world, even though it did not accomplish his aim of causing the Allies to stop the slaughter of the Jewish population in Poland. It was quite simple, Marek told Helena Kral. A bunch of young people decided to fight as a demonstration of contempt of the Hitler machine and an expression of human dignity. And they chose their manner of dying.
I'd like to ask Irena Klepfisz to please come up.
On April 19, 1943, Warsaw Ghetto fighters began a heroic battle against the German war machine, an armed battle they knew they could not win. My father was killed in that uprising, together with thousands of others. But we know that Jewish resistance did not end with the destruction of the ghetto. Unarmed resistance continued until liberation. That unarmed struggle saved most of the people that comprised the community in which I was raised. Today, I would like to honor two seemingly ordinary women who were unarmed resistance fighters, two heroes responsible for my survival. My mother, Rose Perchikov-Klepfisz, and Helena Schäffner, a Bundeskamrad who was my father's French teacher. You just heard from her granddaughter talking about Marek. I'm going to read a selection from my autobiographical poem, Bashert, which describes how my mother and Pani Helena saved me. Poland, 1944. My mother is walking down a road. My mother is walking down a road somewhere in Poland, walking towards an unnamed town for some kind of permit. She is carrying her Aryan identity papers. She has left me with an old peasant who is willing to say she is my grandmother. My mother is sick, goiter, malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies. She has skin sores which she cannot cure. For months now, she has been living in complete isolation. She has been her own sole advisor, companion, comforter. Almost everyone of her world is dead. 3 sisters, nephews and nieces, her mother, her husband, her in-laws, all gone. Even the remnants of the resistance, those few left after the uprising, have disappeared into the Polish countryside. She is more alone than she could have ever imagined. Only she knows her real name, and she is perhaps dying. She is 30 years old. My mother is walking down a road. Another woman joins her. My mother sees through the deception, but she has promised herself that never, under any circumstances, will she take that risk. Someone is walking towards them, a large, strange woman with wild red hair. They try not to look at her too closely to seem overly curious, but as they pass, my mother feels something move inside her. The movement grows and grows till it is an explosion of yearning that she cannot contain. She stops, orders her companion to continue without her, and then she turns. The woman with the red hair has also stopped and turned. She is grotesque, bloated with hunger, almost savage in her rags. She and my mother move towards each other. Cautiously, deliberately, they probe past the hunger, the swollen flesh, the infected skin, the rags. Slowly, they begin to pierce 5 years of encrusted history, and slowly, there is perception and recognition. In this wilderness of occupied Poland, in this vast emptiness where no one can be trusted, my mother has suddenly, bizarrely, met one of my father's teachers, a family friend, another Jew. They do not cry, but weep as they chronicle the dead and count the living. Then they rush to me. To the woman, I'm a familiar sight. She calculates that I will not live out the week, but comments only on my striking resemblance to my father. She says she has contacts. She leaves. One night, a package of food is delivered anonymously. We eat. We begin to bridge the gap towards life. We survive.
Sarah?
Unser Lied ist voll mit Treue, dreist ist unser Untergang. Trotz der Säune wacht beim Teuer, sturm klug mit Gesang. Weil jung ist jeder, wer es will noch, Jahren haben kein Partei. Alte kennen euch sein Kinder von einer neuer, freier Zeit. Wer es wogelt aufwecken, wer mit Dreistkeit stellt sein Fuß, bringt die Jugend sei entgegen, von dem Ghetto a Geruss, weil jung ist jeder, wer es will noch, Jahren haben kein Badeit. Alte kennen euch sein Kinder
gedenken alle Sonnen, mir der Wohnen, alle Freien, ewig Quellen, mir verbinden, unser Nächten mitten heim. Junges, jeder, wer es will, nur Jahren haben kein Partei. Alte kennen, euch sein Kinder, von einer neuer, freier Zeit.
And now I'd like to ask Dina Slipovich to come up.
Von morgen an will ich unmittig sein. Von morgen. Heint nein, will ich nicht. Heint will ich freilich sein. Und also jeden Tag will ich sagen, wie bitter soll nicht sein. Von morgen an will ich unmittig sein. Heint nein. From tomorrow on I shall be sad. From tomorrow on. Today I shall be gay. What is the use of sadness? Tell me that. Because these evil winds begin to blow? Why should I grieve today for tomorrow? Tomorrow may be so good, so sunny. Tomorrow the sun may shine for us again. We will no longer need to be sad. From tomorrow on, I shall be sad. From tomorrow on, not today. Today I shall be glad. And every day, no matter how bitter it be, I shall say, from tomorrow on, I shall be sad, not today.
Caroline?
Unter die Poylische Grininke Beymelekh spielen sich mehr nicht kein Meuschelach Schleimelach, spielen sich mehr nicht kein Sorelach Leelach, nicht auf kein Gräselach, nicht auf kein Schneelach. Sichen schon mehr nicht die jiddische Stilelach, von die Kundeiselach, Motele, Schmerke, mit die zerkrellte, zerdrabete Zorelach, von dem Beweisen von deren und Gworelach. Sreien sind die Poylische Beymelekh, teut seinen jiddische Himen und Beymelekh, teut seinen Gesselach oder die Heiselach, wo es verstecken sich Kinder wie Meiselach, jiddische Kinder mit große Egelach, schwarzer Säuwi mit Heuschreck verzogene, Egelach voller mit Packard verlaufene, unter dem Unglück dem Bräunem getroffene. Unter die Poylische Grininke Beymelekh spielen sich mehr nicht kein Meuschelach Schleimelach, spielen sich mehr nicht kein Sorelach Leelach, nicht auf kein Gräselach, nicht auf kein Schneelach.
Now I'd like to ask Suzanne Torn, and after her, Stephen Mead.
Some 80 years ago today, there was a gathering here at this very site, at the site of the future memorial to those who had not survived, and as a place to hear the names and commemorate the communities of those who had perished. My mother, Vega Mead, Vladke Mead, then a young woman of 27, was one of those highlighted speakers who regularly through the decades returned again to this site to speak about the struggle for survival in the ghetto and on the Aryan side, and how we, the Jewish people, had been abandoned by our non-Jewish neighbors, even in our own neighborhoods, and by nearly every other nation at this time. There was something extraordinary about that young woman who was speaking to her own comrades and families, not only about the losses, but about the lessons imparted by heroes and heroines of her generation, and the pride that we were to take from the example of dignity and humanity that those who had gone to the trains had given as their final gift to their own families. In the past few years, I've had the opportunity, 50 years later, to retranslate my mother's book, to capture the eloquence of the speech and fine writing, particularly her beautiful Yiddish language that was not conveyed in the original translation from 60 years ago. This new translation from the original was released about a month ago, and I thought that it might be nice to hear for the first time in a long time the very words that Vladke was using. I want to do that, but my own gift for Yiddish is not good enough. So now I have a partner in crime. Suzanne Toren did a wonderful job of doing an audio version of the book in English, and will now read an excerpt from the Yiddish. After that, I will go back and do the same excerpt in the new way that we've translated it into English. What I hope we accomplish by this is to give a sense that even after 50 years, the language can grow and the language can continue to give new truths and new wisdom. In this excerpt, and many of you have heard it already, Vladke describes a terrifying encounter with a German lieutenant as she tries to leave the ghetto with a work group looking to carry out of the ghetto a secret copy of the plans of the Treblinka hidden in her shoes.
Der Gendarm ist schon nicht weit von mir. Plötzlich eine Frage. Was tut da die Frau? Ich zitter auf. Sie arbeitet in der Fabrikkirche, entfört der Gruppenführer. Der Deutsch messt mich ab von Kopf bis die Füße, betracht mich wie etwas Teut gezeigt. Gefällst mir nicht. Geh rein dorten. Er weist mit dem Finger auf einen hilzeren Stiebel. Ich antworte schon gar nicht, nur lass ich schweigendig führen. Beim Reingang von hilzeren Stiebel liegt ein zerblutigter Jid. Ein bisschen weiter steht das 13-jährige Mädel. Man hielt es. Schwer wird mir auf dem Herzen. Wer weiß, was mich erwartet? Der Poliziant geht a stolz die Tür und ich bin inne wenig. Als es tummelte, bleib ich stehen. In Zimmerl ist lichtig, es brennt Elektrie. A klein Tischel und a Stuhl stehen inmitten. Die Wände sind bespritzt mit Blut, behangen mit Mappes und mit Bildern von nackten Frauen. Auf der Podloge, in a Kaluge Blut, walgern sich verschiedene Sachen. Manteln, Schier, Wäsch. Beim kleinen Fensterl hängt a Beitsch, verendigt mit a bleienem Käppel. Ich stehe bei der Wand und rühre sich nicht von Ort. Ich wart. Der Tier öffnet sich. Der Gendarm kommt herein. Ich prüfe sich zu beherrschen. Er soll nicht hören das hohe Klappen von mein Herz. Nomen und Familie? Ich entferne. Wo arbeitest du? Ich rufe an das Ort, wo es arbeitet die Gruppe, mit welcher ich bin gegangen. Aha! Nu, jetzt weiß mir, was du hast mit sich. Er zieht von mir herab das Mantel, die Kleider, nimmt sie unter dem Licht, trägt euch die Käschenes, die Falden, sucht in der Net. Er soll noch nicht heißen, euch und die Schiech, dann bin ich ein Verlorene. Bei Asa gründlich suchen, wird er sicher gefunden. Nu, jetzt die Schiech. A Kält geht mir durch die Beine. Schnell laufen die Gedanken. Beymelekh, kedei zu gewinnen mehr Zeit, los ich sich herunter auf der Podloge und heb langsam an abzuschnirren die Schier. Er lässt nicht darauf die Augen von mir. Sein Blick stecht wie mit Spießen. Schneller, die Schier, der Herst, herauf sich grablen. Siehst die Beitsch? Ich entferne nicht, nur automatisch tue ich aus dem Schuch. Er nimmt darauf die Beitsch und hebt an sich der Nentern zu mir. Ich halte ein der Motten, mach zu die Augen, ich wart auf den Schmitz. Plötzlich, Saraness, die Tier reißt sich auf. A heiserke Stimme schreit herein, Herr Lieutenant, kommt schneller raus, a Jude ist entlaufen. Er läuft raus, die Tier verhackt sich. Ich bin weiter allein. Ich atem ab, schnell tue sich an, bring sich in Ordnung und probiere rausgehen. Beim Tier verhält mich der Wächter. Wohin? Zu der Gruppe, entferne ich, und mit der gemachten Gleichgültigkeit gebe ich zu, man hat mich schon kontrolliert.
A shorter version in English. Now it is our turn for our working group to be reviewed by the control. Each worker shows his documents and each gives an answer and seems to be going well. Then the German is almost up to me. Suddenly, I hear Suddenly, I hear a question in German. What is this woman doing here? I start to shiver. She works in the factory kitchen, answers the foreman. The German officer's eyes carefully stare me down. It feels like a death sentence. I don't like your face, he says to me, pointing to the wooden shack. Get over there. I don't envy her, I hear a voice speaking from behind me. My blood runs cold. What do I do now? I think of all those underground leaflets with the diagrams of Treblinka that I have stuffed into my shoes. Surely the German will find these papers, and if so, not only will they punish me, but probably the entire work gang will be taken as well. I look back at my group. Every eye shows regret or terror. Inside the shed, in the small room, well lit by an electric bulb, a small table and a chair stand in the middle. The walls are splattered with blood, hung with maps and pictures of naked women. On the floor lie scattered items confiscated from previous unfortunates. A small whip with a leather handle hangs by a window, and I stand motionless, waiting. The door opens, and a German officer enters. My heart beats so loud, I am afraid that he can hear it from across the room. Name and family, the officer demands. I answer. Where do you work? I tell him the name of the work gang I am with. Aha. Now show me what you have on you. And the German takes off my coat and then my clothes and carries them all over to the light to check for pockets and in the lining. What if he has me take off my shoes? There's no way that he will be able to not find my papers. Now your shoes, he says. My thoughts race. To buy a bit of time, I get down on the floor and slowly start to unlace the shoes. The German does not look back. His gaze continues to burn into my skin. Hurry, the shoes, stop fiddling. Don't you see what this whip can do? I say nothing, but mechanically continue to take off the shoes, taking them off one at a time as the whip comes off the hook and he advances towards me. Suddenly, the door bursts open. Lieutenant, come quickly. A Jew has escaped. The officer dashes out. The door slams shut behind him, and I am left by myself inside the shack. Do I risk running out? I must. Moving quickly, I get dressed, straighten myself, and try the door. There's a guard outside. What are you doing? Where are you going? He asks. Back to my group, I answer nonchalantly. The German already has examined me. He's sending me back. I find myself now outside. I am being sent back to the control, and I will be slipping into another work brigade that will take me to my new home.
Ghettos Füße wendt in die Welt der Freie. Anstatt Keten auf die Hände, halt der Büchse nahe. Der Faschist, der zittert hart, weiß nicht wovon Wahnen stürmen, wie von Unter dreht jeden Partisaner. Wenig sein in mir in Zoll, heißt wie Millionen, reißen mir auf Berg und Toll, blicken Eschalonen. Der Faschist, der zittert hart, weiß nicht wovon Wahnen stürmen, wie von unterdreht jeden Partisaner. Der Faschist, der zittert hart, weiß nicht wovon Wahnen stürmen, wie von unterdreht jeden Partisaner. Zwolkene Komme hat sehen, wenn mit Blut verschreibst ihm vor dem heiligen Bagin, führen mir die Streiten. Der Faschist, der zittert hart, weiß nicht rufen, warnen, Stuben triefen und dreht jeden Partisanen. Nein, wir wollen kein Wohl sein, trotz den Mohikaner, sprengt die Nacht, die Sonnenschein, der jeder Partisaner, der Faschist, der zittert hart, weiß nicht wovon warnen, Sturmen wie von unterdreht jeden Partisanen. Nein, wir wollen kein Mal sein, die letzte Mohikaner. Sprengt die Nacht, die Sonnenschein, der Jid, der Partisaner.
And now I'd like to ask Emily Bernstein-Dunkel to please come up.
This essay, My Wartime Experiences, was written by my great-aunt, Vladke Blitt Robinson, who is my grandmother's twin sister, Aunt Vladke. Aged 95, is living in London, near her children and grandchildren. My twin sister Nellie and I were born in Warsaw in 1931. In August 1939, we were with my parents on holiday in the Polish mountains near Zakopane. Rumors of a German invasion meant that we had to cut short our holiday and hurry home to Warsaw, where we lived in a small apartment. Within days, war broke out and Warsaw was subjected to bomb raids. My parents decided that they had to leave Warsaw because of their political activities. My father was a leading member of the Jewish Socialist Labor Bund, and my mother was a head mistress of a Yiddish primary school and active in Polit. They thought that taking young children on foot to the Russian frontier would be too dangerous, so we were left with our grandparents, aunts and uncles, and cousins, Yezrik, age 15, and Paul, age 4. When my parents were leaving, my uncle Jacob cried. I knew then awful things were happening. Following the Russo-German Pact, Soviet troops invaded Poland, and my parents found themselves in Russian-occupied Poland. My mother, Fela Herzog-Blitt, managed to smuggle herself back to Warsaw to be with us. My father, Lucian Blitt, also tried to get back to Warsaw, but he was caught by the Russians and imprisoned in a labor camp until 1942, when he was released and joined the Polish army. As soon as the Germans occupied Warsaw, they began issuing anti-Jewish laws. I remember being chased by gangs of Polish hooligans organized by the Germans. A high brick wall topped with barbed wire was constructed around a quarter of Warsaw, which became the ghetto. We had to move there. Conditions in the ghetto were appalling. Random shootings, beatings, hostage-taking, typhoid, overcrowding, homelessness, and people dead from hunger in the streets. But there were also secret self-help committees, schools, libraries, synagogues, and political organizations. My mother was in charge of one of the few soup kitchens for starving children. There, I saw many of my school friends swollen from hunger. My sister and I and our cousins spent most days playing with our other children in our courtyard. In 1942, posters appeared in the ghetto announcing the evacuation of the ghetto. Only those working for the Germans were exempted. My family built a bunker in the cellar with a hidden entry, and we hid there when the raids began. We could hear the Germans and Ukrainians shouting for everyone to assemble in the courtyard or be shot. My mother's family were still together. My father's parents and sister had already been taken away to be murdered. Because of my parents' connection with Polit and the Bund, Irena Klepfisz, who was a Bundist courier on the Aryan side, outside the ghetto, found a Polish Catholic family who, for payment, agreed to shelter my sister and me in their home at great risk to themselves. At night, we were smuggled out of the ghetto, climbing a ladder over the wall. We were told that we now had new documents and new names and were never to mention to anyone who we really were. The decision that we should leave the ghetto was taken so quickly that I cannot remember saying goodbye properly to my family. The Polish family named Dubiel were kind to us and very devoted to Michal Klepfisz, who they knew before the war. From the window of their apartment, we could see over the ghetto wall, and often our mother would come in the evenings and walk discreetly on the other side of the wall. For a short time, Michal Klepfisz shared the same apartment and told us about smuggling arms into the ghetto. 5 weeks after we escaped during the Passover holiday of 1943, German and Ukrainian troops surrounded the ghetto and systematically destroyed it. Michal Klepfisz fought in the ghetto and died there. Eventually, I was taken by Vladke and given to a family named Serafin. The young husband became drunk and violent almost every day and often beat his wife. I was frightened of him, but he never harmed me or their small daughter. Vladke came to pay for me once a month, and I waited impatiently for her visit, as I had no contact with anyone else I knew. The Polish Warsaw upbringing began in September of 1943. The uprising was put down after heavy bombing, and the Germans evacuated Warsaw of all its remaining inhabitants. We were put on a train, but managed to jump off when it slowed down, and went to a village where the Serafins had distant relatives. When the Russians finally arrived, I thought I was the only Jew left in Poland, apart from Vladke. For some weeks, no one came, and I felt completely helpless. The Serafin family and I eventually set out that winter to walk back to the ruins of Warsaw. My only footwear was a pair of torn sandals. We found a habitable room, but without proper shoes, I could not go out. At the same time, my sister Nellie came back to Warsaw from another village. She was still with Miss Dubiel, and together they found a Jewish committee set up to help survivors. There she recognized Vladke, and soon another underground Jewish courier, Alla Margulies, came to look for me. Alla was the wife of Marek Edelman, one of the surviving leaders of the uprising. So I was reunited with my sister, and later, miraculously, with my two young cousins, who had escaped from the ghetto through the sewers just a few days before the liquidation. In 1946, my sister and I, aged 14, came to London to join our father. It felt strange to meet him again after those terrible 6 years. We hardly talked about what had happened. The rest of my family were all murdered. They included my grandparents, Mordechai and Leah Herzlich, and Fela and Wolf Blitt, my aunt Pola Blitt, and the parents of my cousins, Jezik and Paul, who looked after the children of the family so selflessly. Also murdered were my uncle Leon and aunt Nusia Herzlich, who had the means to escape but would not abandon their parents. My mother, Fela, was murdered at Treblinka. She is praised for her work in the ghetto soup kitchen by Professor Emanuel Ringelblum in his diaries, The Chronicles of the Warsaw Ghetto.
We have traditionally ended our program with two special songs. We sing the Partizana Lied, Song of the Partisans, because it gave strength and hope to our parents and grandparents as they sang its words. Hirschglick wrote the song in the Vilna Ghetto, inspired by the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. The fighters could not accept defeat. They refused to believe they were taking their final steps, no matter how bleak it looked. They believed their day of deliverance would come. We also sing the Bundische Schwur, the anthem of the Bund, which literally means the oath, because the Jewish Labor Bund has been the primary organizer of this gathering since the 1950s. And we who gather here call for unity and take our sworn oath to resist tyranny and continue the fight for justice and equality. The words for our two closing songs appear in transliteration on the back of your program. I'd like you to please stand as our singers come to lead us in singing the Partizane hymn and the Bundische Schwur.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today in spite of this rain. On behalf of our organizing committee, Shane Baker, Fagala Jacobs, myself, Marcel Kshensky, Rita Mead, and Moshe Rosenfeld, I'd like to thank all our participants for creating this event. Please join us for a few moments as we lay flowers on Der Stein. And again, thank you so much for joining us, and stay safe. Thank you all.